At Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law laughed and said, "I canceled your wedding venue. Now you have to do it my way." I thought it was a joke until I called the venue. My fiance's response left her screaming. I knew my future mother-in-law. Deborah was controlling, but I never thought she'd go this far. It all went down last Thanksgiving at her house in Houston. My fiancé Matt and I had been engaged for about 8 months, and we'd finally booked our dream wedding venue, a gorgeous old estate outside of Austin, set on rolling hills with big oak trees and fairy lights. It was expensive, but we'd saved for it, and it was our choice. Deborah, however, had other ideas. From the moment we got engaged, she made it her personal mission to guide us toward what she thought was best. That meant her guest list, her catering choices, and even her suggestions on my dress. At first I thought she was just excited, but the deeper we got into planning, the more I realized she didn't want to help us. She wanted full control. The final straw came during Thanksgiving dinner. We were sitting around the table halfway through turkey and mashed potatoes, when Deborah leaned back in her chair, swirling a glass of wine like a cartoon villain. Then she laughed, this smug, knowing laugh that instantly put me on edge. "I hope you didn't get too attached to that wedding venue," she said, smirking, "because I canceled it. Now you have to do it my way." The room went dead silent. I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. Canceled. Surely she was joking. This was our wedding, our money, our contract. Matt, sitting beside me, went stiff. His jaw clenched. "You're joking, right?" I finally managed. Deborah just smiled, taking a sip of her wine. "Honey, it was for the best. That place was way too expensive. I found a lovely church instead, much more traditional. And the reception. We can do it at my friend's country club. It'll be beautiful. Trust me." I didn't trust her, not for a second, shaking. I pulled out my phone under the table and tested the venue manager. "Hi, this is my name. I just wanted to confirm our wedding reservation is still set for date." Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. "I'm so sorry, but your reservation was canceled last week by a Deborah, last name Dot. She said she was your wedding planner. We've already booked the date for another couple." My stomach dropped. She really did it. I looked up at her, my face burning. "How dare you?" Deborah shrugged, unfazed. "I did you a favor? You'll see it's all for the best." Matt stood up so fast, his chair scraped against the floor. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you?" Her smug expression cracked. She didn't expect him to be angry. "Don't be so dramatic, Matthew," she said, rolling her eyes. "You'll both thank me later." Matt laughed, not a happy laugh, but the kind you let out when you're trying not to completely lose your mind. Then he pulled out his phone. Deborah watched him, her face twitching with suspicion. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he put his phone to his ear. "Hey, Uncle Jack," he said. "Happy Thanksgiving to you too. Listen, I need a favor." Now, a little backstory. Uncle Jack is a high-powered attorney, kind that terrifies people like Deborah. The kind that makes corporations cry in courtrooms. Deborah's eyes widened. "Matthew, stop. There's no need for." So my mother just committed fraud, impersonated my fiancé, and canceled our wedding venue behind our backs. "Think you can look into that for us?" Deborah screeched, like full-on horror movie level screaming. "Matthew, stop this right now. You're overreacting." Matt turned away from her, still on the phone. "Definitely she impersonated us, lied to them, probably signed something under false pretenses. That's illegal, right?" "Matthew, I was just trying to help," she wailed, her voice going shrill. Turned back to her, his expression ice cold. "You didn't help. You ruined everything. And now you're going to fix it." I have never seen her face go so pale. She knew she messed up big time, and we weren't done yet. Deborah's face twisted in panic. The control she had so carefully held onto was slipping, and she knew it. "Matthew, honey," she said, her voice suddenly soft, fake sweet. "Let's not ruin Thanksgiving over a misunderstanding. We are family." Matt's eyes narrowed. "A misunderstanding. Canceled our venue behind our backs, impersonated us. And now we have no place to get married." Deborah's lips pressed into a thin line. I thought you'd see reason. The venue you picked was too extravagant. It wasn't right. This way, you get a beautiful, elegant wedding." I snapped. "No, Deborah, you get a wedding you wanted. This was never about us. You couldn't stand that. We were making our own decisions, so you stole them from us." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. She had no defense, because she knew I was right. But Matt wasn't done. "Fix this," he said, his voice sharp. "Right now." Deborah's nostrils flared. "Matthew, be reasonable. The new venue is already arranged." "I don't care." He shot back. "You're going to call them. You're going to tell them you lied. If our venue is booked, you're paying every cent to find us a new one we choose." Deborah's hands curled into fists. "If I don't," Matt didn't even hesitate, "then you're not invited to the wedding. And if you keep pushing, we're going no contact." The table froze. Even Deborah's husband George, who had been sitting quietly this whole time, suddenly looked alarmed. "Now son, let's not go that far." Matt cut him off. "No, Dad. This isn't just about a venue, this is years of her pushing, controlling, and interfering. And if she thinks she can just walk all over us and get away with it, she's wrong. I had never seen Deborah look so stunned. Her own son was putting her in check. Her face twitched, shifting between anger, disbelief, and something else, something close to fear. "Matthew," she tried again, quieter this time. "I only wanted what's best for you." "No," he said. "You wanted what's best for you." The silence was deafening. For the first time in her life, Deborah was facing real consequences, and she did not like it. Then, just when I thought she might cave, she did something I didn't expect. She smirked. A slow, knowing smirk that made my stomach turn. "Sweetheart," she said, tilting her head. "You think you hold all the cards that you can just threaten to cut me out and I'll roll over?" She shook her head, still smirking. "You're forgetting something very important." Matt folded his arms. "And what's that?" Deborah leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table. The money. A chill ran down my spine. I knew Deborah and her husband were wealthy. They had always flaunted their money, always reminded Matt that they had set him up for success, but Matt and I had worked hard to be independent. We never wanted to rely on them. Still, I knew what she was getting at before. She even said it. She turned her gaze to me, smiling like a cat playing with a cornered mouse. "Dear, you didn't think Matt paid for that venue on his own, did you?" My heart stopped. Matt's entire body went rigid. "What are you talking about?" Deborah's smirk widened. "That venue, that expensive, overpriced venue you two were so in love with. I saw the contract. I know exactly how much it cost. I know exactly where the deposit came from. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Matt had told me he paid for it himself, that he had used his savings." Deborah let out a soft, triumphant chuckle. "I transferred that money into your account months ago. I saw the withdrawal, so technically I paid for the venue. And if I paid for it, that means I have every right to decide where the wedding happens, doesn't it?" Matt's face drained of color, couldn't breathe. Because the truth was, Deborah wasn't wrong. She had played us. She had waited, biding her time, letting us think we had full control, until the moment she could pull the rug out from under us. I wanted to scream. She sat back looking so pleased with herself, like she had won. Matt exhaled slowly through his nose, his hands curled into fists, but his face went blank. That's when I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Matt didn't say a word. He just stared at his mother, his expression unreadable. Tension in the room was so thick. It felt like the air had been sucked out. Deborah sat there looking like a queen who had just checkmated her opponent. She thought she had us backed into a corner. She thought we had no way out, but she had no idea what Matt was about to do next. Without breaking eye contact, he smiled. Not a happy smile, not an amused smile, cold smile. "Interesting," he said, his voice early calm. "So you're saying you paid for the venue?" Deborah's smirk flickered for half a second. "That's right. And that means Matt cut her off. You committed fraud." Deborah blinked. What, she scoffed, but there was a crack in her voice now. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not," Matt said, tilting his head slightly. "See, if you were the one who paid for it, then why did the contract have my name on it? Why was the confirmation sent to our email? Why did the venue tell us that it was canceled by someone pretending to be us?" Deborah's face twitched. Matt leaned in just slightly. "Mom, did you wire me that money as a gift? Or did you falsely claim to the venue that you had full control over the contract?" Her eyes darted to her husband George, as if begging him to intervene. George just sat there stunned. "Because if you paid for it on my behalf, that means I had full control over the contract." Matt continued. "If that's the case, then you impersonated me and my fiancé, forged documents, and interfered with a legal contract. That's what identity fraud, contract fraud, maybe wire fraud, depending on how you transferred the money." Deborah's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Could actually see the moment she realized the hole she had dug for herself. Matt pulled out his phone. "Maybe Uncle Jack should take a look at this. I'm sure he'd find it interesting." "Matthew," Deborah finally crooked her voice hoarse. Didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just trying to." Matt stood up. "This was never about the wedding," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "This was about you controlling me, controlling us. You just couldn't stand the fact that I was making my own choices without your permission." "Matthew," she whispered, shaking her head. "Please." "No," he said firmly. "I'm done." And then he dropped the real bombshell. "We're moving up the wedding." I whipped my head around. "Wait, what?" Matt turned to me. And for the first time since this nightmare started, he actually looked relaxed. "We're getting married next month," he said, his voice steady. "And it's going to be exactly how we want it." Deborah gasped. "Next month? But that's not enough time. You'll never find a venue that fast." "You can't." Matt looked her dead in the eye. "We already have one." Deborah's face fell, because that's when it hit her. She wasn't invited. Deborah's face twisted in panic. "Matthew," she gasped. "You're being irrational. You need time to plan to know." Matt said firmly. "We don't need time. We just need to be away from you." I could tell she was trying to find a way to fix this, to worm her way back in, but Matt wasn't giving her a chance. He turned to me, took my hand and said, "Let's go." And we did. We left Thanksgiving dinner right then, and there, leaving Deborah sitting in her perfectly decorated dining room, her UN-eaten turkey on her plate, and her mouth still hanging open. She tried calling, testing, even had George reach out on her behalf, but Matt ignored every single attempt. She had finally lost control, and she knew it. The real revenge begins the next morning. Matt and I got to work. First, we called Uncle Jack. Matt explained everything. The impersonation, the fraud, the manipulation. Uncle Jack didn't even hesitate. "She committed fraud," he said bluntly. "Do you want to press charges?" Matt paused. He glanced at me. I could tell he was thinking about it. Weighing the nuclear option. "No," he finally said, "not yet." I understood why he didn't want to start a legal battle with his own mother, not unless we had to. That didn't mean we were going to let it go. Uncle Jack advised us to send her a formal letter outlining what she had done, making it clear that if she ever tried to interfere in our lives again, we would take legal action. And just like that, the leverage shifted. Deborah, for the first time in her life, was powerless. The new wedding without her, now that we had made it clear she was cut off, we moved fast with Uncle Jack's connections. We found a new venue within days. Private vineyard in the Texas Hill Country, smaller, more intimate, and way more us. The best part, it was available next month. We invited everyone except Deborah. She found out anyway, probably through a distant relative or social media. The moment she realized she was officially uninvited, she went into full meltdown mode. She left voicemails, some begging, some screaming. She tried showing up at Matt's office only to be turned away by security. She even had George call and plead on her behalf, but Matt stood firm. "If she shows up, I will have her removed." He told George this is non-negotiable. George sighed, and for the first time he actually sounded defeated. "She's never going to forgive you for this." Matt just laughed. Good. The wedding day and final revenge. Our wedding day arrived without a hitch. The vineyard was stunning, the food was amazing, and the atmosphere perfect. And best of all, no Deborah. I found out later that she had tried to get in. She actually drove to the venue and demanded to be let through the gates. Security turned her away twice. She screamed at them, insisting she was the groom's mother, and that it was her right to be there. The security guard, he just smiled and said, "Sorry ma'am, you're not on the list." Apparently she sat in her car for an hour, hoping someone would change their mind. No one did. While she sat fuming in the parking lot, Matt and I were inside, surrounded by people who actually loved and supported us. The final blow after the wedding, we went no contact, no more phone calls, no more visits, nothing. That's when Deborah really started to feel the consequences of her actions. Because she wasn't just cut out of our wedding, she was cut out of our lives. Holidays. She wasn't invited. Grandkids in the future. She won't meet them. Family events. She's not welcome. We heard from other relatives that she spent months crying about how ungrateful Matt was, how I had brainwashed him, how we were so cruel for excluding her. But no one took her side because everyone knew what she had done. She had played a stupid game and lost everything. The last message, a year later, she sent one final message. It was long, dramatic, and full of self-pity. She ended it with, "I hope one day you realize how much I loved you." Matt just stared at the message for a moment, then he deleted it. And just like that, Deborah was gone from our lives forever. We never looked back.